Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Faith Chats. On today's episode, my guest Kaisha Green and I will be discussing her new book, What's the Bid? Focused Families and Restored Vision, which is a 28-day family devotional. With families being so divided these days, this book is definitely much needed to help bring healing, unity, and power back to families. And yes, I did say power because there is strength in unity. So you may remember Kaisha from episode 3, where we talked about the importance of community. Well, here is a little bit about her. She is a minister, a former middle school counselor, and now she is the author of a book with a big mission and vision for families attached to it. Kaisha, welcome back to Faith Chats. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. And just excited for the release of this book.
Well, I'm excited to have you back, and I'm excited to talk about this book today. So, as I mentioned, the title of your book is What's the Bid? Focus Families with Restored Vision, and it's a 28-day devotional. So, the title of the book is a little bit ambiguous. So, when somebody hears that title or they pick up that book, they may not at first glance or at first hearing it know what it means. So, can you tell us a little bit about like what that title means and what made you select it?
Yes. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm from Philly. I'm a Philly girl, born and raised in North Philadelphia. And one of the things that we've always heard growing up, when somebody would crack a joke or somebody would be busting on, different people or making light of different situations, you may hear people say, "Yo, like you the bid." Or like you always bidding, you always busting on people. And so that was one of the that I had when I thought about this book. But for those of you that know me, I like to kind of like look at different words and, just kind of look at the different meanings of how they're used, whether it's, slang or either, even in the English dictionary. And so when I further thought about the title, I thought about bid in terms of a prison sentence. So sometimes you may hear someone refer to when they say like, how long do you have to serve? You may hear them talk about a bid. And then also just bid in terms of, I was going through a phase where my brother was teaching me about investments, and he was teaching me about, stocks and different things. And we know that, when it comes to bidding, it's the highest price that you're willing to pay. And then it's that minister side of me, that spiritual side that kicks in as like, yo, when Jesus died on the cross for our sins, he paid the highest price for us. Like he was willing to do the bid. He was willing to make the investment. So just tying, all of those things together, coming up with the title. And then also one of the main parts of the book, I talk about being intentional daily. So when you're coming together with your families, when you're spending time with your children, or if you don't have children, just spending time, with other family members, be intentional every day about, doing that as well. So I'm excited. I'm excited about the title, and I just hope that it speaks to others the way that it spoke to me as I was writing it.
Yes, absolutely. So, focusing on what's the bid from the aspect of busing, growing up in the African American community, that was like a cultural norm. And so, like a lot of the shows that we watched growing up, it had a lot of like bidding or busing that took place. And so, I'm just wondering, did you have any favorite shows where they were always bidding on each other? And if so, are there any particular bids that still stand out to you today?
So one show, a familiar show, in our household was Martin. So we watched Martin a lot, and everybody know Pam and Martin, they were infamous for just like always just going at each other, just busting on one another. And even in the midst of them like busting on one another, they still had like a love-hate type of relationship. Like they would, sometimes, they would go too far and somebody would have to kind of like reel them back in. But even sometimes in the toughest situations, they were able to kind of like make light of it. But then they still maintain, a relationship. They still maintain some type of healthy relationship. That would be the show that I would think of. That's the first show that comes to mind.
Yes.
And then just like as I mentioned in the book, my uncle, God rest his soul, he was, a person that we would look forward to when we would go down to Jersey to visit my grandmother, and he was a person that would just bid all day. He would bid all day and have, from the oldest to the youngest, just laughing and cracking up. And it really just kind of sometimes took your mind off of, whatever it is that may have been weighing you down. So just, finding times where you could just find, humor in some situations, not to take away from those situations, but sometimes just having that open space to kind of just like, whew, like breathe.
Yeah. Coming from a big family with a lot of siblings, I call it bussin' bit, and it's something that we used to do like all the time. And even when we get together now as adults, it's something that we still do. It's become like a sort of love language for us at this point. So when you were growing up, is that something that you enjoy doing? Because I know some people, they didn't really like bidding. They felt like they liked to joke on people, but they didn't necessarily want the joke to be back on them. Or some people felt like they just weren't quick enough to do like the whole bid thing. So growing up, is that something that you enjoy doing?
I probably would say kind of in between. I probably was the one that was just always just laughing. Anybody that really knows me, like I'm just laughing. Like sometimes you be like, wait, oh wait a minute, I shouldn't have laughed at that. Like, okay, let me get it together. But yeah, I probably was the one that was just like just laughing, laughing, laughing. And I think I mentioned in the book, like, there's this debate on whether or not,
Yes.
is healthy or unhealthy. Because the flip side of it is, some people, depending on how far some people would go with, bidding
Yeah.
and busting.
Yeah.
For some people, it may have caused like low self-esteem, or, it may have caused you to kind of like quickly shut down, or, kind of become offensive anytime you hear somebody say something.
Yeah.
And it may just be they're just joking around, but in your mind is a trigger for you because of the amount of like busting and bidding that you heard
Yeah.
growing
And it can almost give you
up.
like a complex about certain things.
Yeah, and then especially like even in like a school environment, it happens all the time, even in the school environment. And so, sometimes there's this dilemma where, okay,
Yeah.
sometimes, some people can kind of like go so far. So again, that debate on whether or not, is healthy or unhealthy. Again, going back to the examples of Martin and Pam,
Yeah.
there were times where it was like, all right, Martin, you went too far, or all right, Pam, you went too far. And somebody kind of had to like step in and say, all right, let's figure out how we can kind of clean this up and bring the friendship back together.
Yeah, I agree. At the point where I guess people are just getting too hurt and offended about it, kind of got to step back from it. I mean, it did toughen us up as kids because it's like, what can anybody say about me in the street that I haven't already heard in the house? And so it made you like a little less sensitive to things. So yeah, it can definitely go either way.
Yeah.
But I want to transition and get into the book now. So, on the back cover of your book, and I wish I had a copy here to show people, but I love something that you wrote. You put, we get so wrapped up and stuck on focusing on the generational curses that we neglect, nor do we cultivate the generational gifts and blessings that rest on our families. And when I read that, I immediately thought of John 1 and 46, when they said, can anything good come from Nazareth? When they heard that the prophesied Jesus was coming from Nazareth. Like, what? Can anything good come from Nazareth? And it made me think that there are so many people who may look at their families, they may look at all the addiction, all the criminality, all the dysfunction, and they are wondering and questioning, can anything good come from this family? And so I just wanted to see if you could speak to someone who may be battling that mindset.
Yes. So I thought that was a perfect example. Can anything good come from Nazareth? Because sometimes, again, we do have, we battle internally. I know I did, just transparent, as a child, sometimes would ask myself, or sometimes when I would find myself in my quiet space, when I would find myself sitting on the edge of my bed, or even, just sitting on the floor of my bed and, praying, or, just crying out to God, or just being consumed by thoughts. One of the questions, like I would ask, like, can anything good come from our family? Or, sometimes you might think like, oh, I wish my family, was more like this, or we did this, or we did that. And so those thoughts of kind of play on you as a child, but then also, as an adult, a lot of times when we're looking at things through what I like to always say, through just our natural eyes, it tends to, kind of hinder and kind of block like how we see our family. It messes with our perspective. And so one of the things that I've learned to do is to kind of not just look at things at face value, not just look at things, from one lens. I like to look at things from different lenses. And so I would just encourage anyone who may feel like, can anything good come from my family? Can anything good come from, my city, or from my school, or, whatever it is that, you may be referring to? Something good can come from it. We just have to shift our mindset, and we have to shift our perspective on how we view things. Because when we view only from the lens of trauma, we see things almost in like a prison, within a prison mindset. But once we kind of get exposed to different things, once we read our word and we're praying, and God begins to show you, something different. He begins to show you, give you insight, and he begins to, give you foresight and all of those different things. You can see things from a different lens. So, for anyone who may be feeling like that, just be encouraged to, do the work and ask God to help you shift your perspective and how you see yourself, how you see your family, how you see your city, or, anything that you may be kind of questioning at the moment.
Amen. And also recognizing that we can be the change that we want to see in our family. Like we can be that generational curse breaker. Um, and then the other part is, like you said, focusing on the generational blessings. There are some type of blessings that like you can pull from everything. It may look like you said at face value, oh, my family is only this, and that. Well, what good can you pull? Are people good at doing anything in your family that you can kind of like piggyback off of? Like, okay, maybe nobody has ever graduated with a high school diploma. However, they're really, I don't know, great at keeping food on the table or something. Like, I don't know, like how can I focus on that? Like, how can I take that and like use that instead of just focusing on like all the negative? So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's like a really great point. Is a mind perspective shift that has to occur.
Yeah. And just
So
piggybacking
mhm,
off of that,
yes,
I was reminded of Timothy, and in the scripture where Paul, kind of had to remind him of even the generational blessing, the gift
yes,
of faith, that rested on his family, when he talked about, your mother and your grandmother, and how they had, had faith. And it was something that, Timothy needed in that time. He needed to, stir up his faith and have faith to believe that, he can do everything that God had called him to do. And so again, like when we're looking at the generational blessings that rest on our family, like when I go back through, you know, look back over the bloodline, both for my mom's side as well as my dad's side, one of the things that I believe is a generational blessing and gift, within us, is that heart of compassion, having a heart of
yes.
compassion. Before, I may have viewed it like, oh, sometimes when you have a huge heart, people take advantage, right? So sometimes you may feel like, oh God, why did you make me this way? Why did you make me, to have a huge heart? But as I've grown older, I recognize that that's actually a generational blessing, because not everybody has
Mm,
a heart
I
of
love
compassion.
that.
And so
Love
that's
that.
something that I really value on both my mom's side, my paternal and maternal side of the family, is that one of the things that I'm able to recognize is that there's that generational blessing of having a heart of compassion.
Oh, I love that. I really, really do. Looking at things in a different way. And sometimes what you think is a curse is actually a blessing. Oh, I love that. Ooh, so another really important and great topic that you have in the book is about communication. So personally, I believe that there is so much brokenness in families because we don't know how to communicate. Um, I feel like the generations before us weren't necessarily the best at it, and so you can only teach people what you yourself know. So On page 114, you wrote, communication serves a purpose and has the power to bridge gaps in families and in many other areas. Like, I think that is just such a powerful statement. Because in my experience, the norm in many families, especially when there are like siblings involved, is that when a situation occurs, like the family member stops speaking,
Mhm.
time goes on, and then they'll start back speaking. However, they never actually work through like what that issue was. They simply just like swept it under the rug. So then when the next big thing happens, it rips off that old band-aid and that old wound that was never fully healed begins to just like ooze back out because this new thing has just like deepened that wound. And so I want to ask you, what guidance do you offer in your book to help families learn how to better communicate instead of just simply sweeping things under the rug to get like through that moment?
So aside from that specific chapter or section, if we think about it, the whole book is as a whole is about communication. Is about us kind of, sometimes getting to the root of things. And again, just talking about the bridging of the gaps. One of the things that I realized is that as I've, again, grown older, there were conversations that I was able to have with, different family members, whether it was grandparents or my parents or siblings, aunts and uncles. And I realized that, some of those conversations were probably conversations that um, have really been beneficial, even sometimes, like even through like the growing process. I feel like one of the areas where the enemy fights a lot of families and he just fights people as a whole is that if he can, mute our mouth, if he can muzzle our mouth,
Yeah,
it stops us from breaking, some of those cycles. It stops us from, being able to forgive. It stops us from allowing reconciliation and those different things to take place. And so because we may not in a natural like walk around like this, but
yeah,
in a sense, we're walking around like this. We're walking around with our hand over our mouths. And the enemy, is allowing us to just break, not allowing us to have those open lines of communication with, our families. And because we're not doing that, a lot of times we see that cycles continue because there was no communication. Like you said, sometimes even with siblings and stuff, like we don't know how to, have a healthy conversation and to resolve those different conflicts. And that stuff transpires and it transfers even outside of the home. We
yeah,
see, in our cities, like there's a lot of violence and different things going
yeah,
on. I come from working in the school setting. A lot of times there was a lot of like violence and stuff even going on between the children. And sometimes even, come on, let's be honest, even sometimes
yes,
between adults,
yes,
because we don't know how to talk things through. We don't know how to
right,
resolve conflict in a healthy way. We don't know how to, communicate. And so, it's just one of those things where if we really want to break cycles, if we really want to bridge the gap, we have to do the work and start, having conversations, opening the line of, communication. And just something practical in the book, I believe for like the bid activity, I suggest for you to kind of like talk about music. Like music is something that a lot of times people connect over. So sometimes even maybe, picking a song or something and talking through the lyrics and just kind of opening the lines of communication and even seeing like, the different changes, over different generations. Like, okay, well, growing up in the 70s, this is the music that we listen to. Well, in the 90s, this is what we listen
yeah,
to, and kind of like, comparing and contrasting the different music, but it's opening the line of communication. And you're just kind of setting into practice and into habit, having those set times throughout the day or throughout the week where you're actually interacting with your family. And then just one last thing, we don't see as often as it used to be, people actually coming to the table for dinner.
yes,
Because even coming to the
yeah,
table for dinner, in some households, that was an opportunity to open the line of communication.
yeah,
Thinking back again to like TV shows and stuff like Moesha. I used to watch Moesha a
yeah,
lot. all kinds of conversations would happen, like at the dinner table. But it allowed for them to be just transparent, and it also just brought them together, as a family. So it's some things that, as much as we love shifting into the new, sometimes we have to go back to our foundation. We have to
Yeah,
go back to, some things that may have seemed like, oh, that was just tradition. Well, not all tradition, is wrong or is bad.
yeah,
So sometimes we got to go back to, to those things.
yeah. I mean, you got to do the hard work of dealing with things. I think a lot of times we just, I don't know, just wait for things to work out on its own, but we got to do the hard work of sitting down and having those conversations, and that requires vulnerability. And I feel
Right.
like that's very hard for people. I don't know, they think it's like soft or corny or something to like open up and like express like their feelings and stuff. And I'm saying them, but I think it's true for like all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not easy to be vulnerable and sit down and say, you hurt me, right? Like that even feels weird to say to somebody because we're so used to, having that nonchalant attitude, pretending like nothing has like bothered us, like nothing got to us like that deep or whatever. But the truth of the matter is we're human and things do hurt our feelings. And so in communication, we have to do the hard work of just being honest and then
Yeah.
also letting down our defenses. Like I love what you said. You say, let's normalize hearing what's not being said, normalize listening to understand and not just to respond. And I think so often we don't listen to what's really being said. We're just waiting for our turn because we already have in our mind like what we want to say. No, I know I'm right. This is why I'm upset, and I'm going to let you know. And so I'm missing everything that's being said in the interim. And then it's also the part of you saying what's not being said. Sometimes people don't know how to express themselves. And sometimes we have to look like underneath the surface. Like, yeah, you're saying that, but I think what the issue really is, you felt like X, Y, and Z. And so I think you just speak so great about this whole topic of communication in the book. And I think it's definitely going to be helpful for a lot of people to improve in that area with their families.
Amen.
So you also have a devotional on prayer and intercession. I am excited even mentioning that particular topic. So on page 140, it starts off with, but I had a praying grandmother. Like even just saying that makes me smile. It makes me think of that song like just automatically. But how many of us have this testimony ourselves or have just heard this testimony like through the generations that it was that praying grandmother, it was that auntie, it was somebody, one of our ancestors that just really held us up in prayer. And I truly believe that prayer has worked and it still continues to work to this day. And it is just so vital in helping to keep families together. So, can you just speak a little bit more about the importance of families coming together in prayer and
Yeah.
interceding for family members?
Yes, as you stated, it is very important for us to come together for prayer. That was something that, the Lord had been dealing with different people, even in our family about, and we joke and we're like, well, you do it, get somebody else to do it. Or even when the Lord began to deal with you about different things, or, people would mention like, oh, do a family prayer. We need to start a family prayer. And we're kind of like, get somebody else to do it or you do it. And even just like even seeing from that, like stepping out in obedience when we, actually started that even within our family, just to kind of come together and to meet, for prayer. And it doesn't have to be meeting necessarily in person. We all learned during the pandemic that, technology can be our best friend. So even if it's, over the phone or on Zoom or whatever it is, just get creative, but setting aside that time and being intentional about coming together for prayer. One of the things that, I talked about, prayer as far as like prevention and intervention, because again, I come from a counseling background. And so a lot of the stuff that we did, we often talked about prevention and intervention, those things that we kind of put into practice and put into place beforehand, to kind of, eliminate some of the things that may kind of, come up, or things that we could put in place, for the children or for the families or for the school community. that would kind of, prepare us, just in case a crisis or all of these different things come up. But then there's also intervention. There are things that, sometimes things just come up. And so we got to like, intervene, right away. And so when I thought about that, even in terms of, prayer, if we're honest, a lot of us kind of just go to the emergency. We take the emergency route, like, oh Lord, I got a bill due. Like, let me go to my prayer closet, or something ain't right, or everybody acting up, let me go to the prayer closet. But if we establish a routine and we make it a habit to, pray consistently, make it a part of our life, make it a part of, our everyday lives, then we won't be as caught off guard when, different things kind of come up. And so even in talking about, having a praying grandmother, I would hear people give stories of how they will wake up on Saturday mornings or something, and they would hear like their grandmothers or different ones praying and interceding and, speaking in tongues and, all of these different things. Or you would wake up and hear the music blasting and stuff.
Or
And I'm
have
like,
oil on your head because they was
or you
praying
would
for you
wake
while you
up.
was sleeping and didn't know.
Yeah, when you sleep, you wake up, you be like, I got oil on my head, or why my pillow feel like this? Or you go to turn the doorknob or something, and you be like, a little oil on the doorknob. And so, sometimes that may have not necessarily been things that you've seen, but there are other ways that we knew that like our grandmother or, different ones, they had a prayer life. We saw, even through like their prayer, how it strengthened them to have faith, faith to believe in the fact that, family salvation, was coming. Even though it looked, a little bit crazy, they still believe like, my family will be saved. And even again, growing up and now that I'm older and understanding things a little bit more, and even from different perspectives, and even understanding like the testimonies of things that, they even been through, you understand their strength, you understand their faith, you understand, why they could stand so strong. They could stand strong because they knew how to kneel. They knew how to kneel in the presence of God. They knew how to, shut the door, not necessarily where everybody, to make a scene. They knew how to like get into their secret place, and to pray and to really cry out on behalf of the family. And then just one last thing, one of the things I mentioned in the book is that, I'm grateful for those before us, who lived a life of prayer. We may have kind of like, joked or laughed growing up as kids, but you you recognize now that those prayers, saved some people's lives. Those
Yeah.
prayers, gave us strength. And so, I'm grateful even for, we have that one aunt who would not let you hang up the phone without
Yes.
praying, or you're in her presence and
Yeah.
you could be talking and you're about to leave and she's like, all right, come on, let me pray with you. And no matter
Yeah.
what, she's been consistent over the years. She will stop what she's doing. She will not let you leave her presence without praying. Or
Yeah.
again, you would walk into her room and you would see sticky notes and
Yeah.
notepad and just different things all over, because she lived a life of prayer. And because she lived that life of prayer, I can smile now because it's like we can pick up that mantle. You know what I mean? Like our grandparents and parents and aunts and uncles and sisters and different ones, that stuff wasn't, in vain. Like
Yeah.
we've been watching, we've been watching. And so now, I feel like it's this generation's time to pick up that mantle,
Amen.
and pray. Because some of the things that's, going on within the families and the way that the enemy has been attacking the family, if we would go back to our prayer closet, if we would
Yeah.
truly begin to call on the name of the Lord,
Yeah.
we begin to prevent some of these different
Yes.
things. And at the same time, during the times where we do just need to like intervene, we recognize that is a weapon.
Yeah.
Prayer is a weapon.
It is a
And so
weapon.
kind of going back to like, sometimes some people look at some things like, oh, that's whack, or that's weak, like having a heart of compassion. That's for weak people. No. Having a prayer life is not for, not for the weak. Having
Right.
a prayer life gives you that strength. It gives you
Yes.
that weapon to use. It gives you something to have in your tool belt to use when you're facing a crisis, but not just when you're facing a crisis, because you've made it a part of your everyday life. Sometimes you don't, not saying that there are times where you do buckle, under pressure or don't buckle under pressure, but it just prepares you a little bit more so that you're not so, beat up by things that
Yeah,
want to look at you and be like, yo, if that was me, I would have been beat up by now, or I would have
yeah,
quit by now. But you found the strength to kind of keep pressing because
yeah,
you had a prayer life. And
yeah,
it's not to say that, anybody's prayer life is perfect. We're all a work in process. I'm still even
yeah,
striving in my prayer life, but I look to different ones and see how their faith is strengthened because of their prayer life.
yeah. And I look at my own life and I see the result of that praying mother and grandmother and auntie. And so we know that there is power in prayer and that it works. And it is definitely a benefit to continue and to hold our family up in prayer and teaching that to the generations beneath us. One of the things that I really love about your book is that you, as you mentioned earlier, like you have the activities after each, is it devotional? Or after each
Mhm.
section,
After the
after each
prayer.
devotional, you
Mhm.
have activities. And so you are giving people guidance on what to do in that area, right? You're not just saying like you need to learn how to better communicate. No, you're giving tools and practical tools that they can incorporate with their family to help them improve in those areas. And so I think that's something that people will really appreciate and enjoy. And then I also love, and I don't know if it's a surprise, but you have like a poem at the end of each section. So that's sort of like the seventh day of rest to sit and meditate on the poem that coincides with that section of the book or that week of the book. So there is just so much greatness, so much power, so much anointing in this book. And I am just so excited for just what it's going to do in the lives of the different families that get the book and they apply the different tools and everything that is in it. I just know that there's going to be testimonies that come forth. Before we go, is there anything else that you would like to mention about your book? I mean, I guess I kind of just went through your book. I guess I should have left that for you to do, but is there anything additional that you want people to know or something that you are praying that they take away from it?
Um, I just want people to know that, anything worth having is sometimes, again, like it's worth fighting for. And so we know that, when it comes to family, you have your ups and you have your downs, but it's worth fighting. It's worth fighting for your family. It's worth fighting. Now, I'm not talking about, you know what I mean? Like going out there, like, all right, you know how people pull up and all of that stuff. I ain't
Well,
talking
that
about that.
too. That too.
I ain't talking about that kind of fight. Wait a minute, let me bring that back in. They're like, she
I
was
think
like,
it's a double
no.
meaning, just like the title of your book. It's worth fighting for and it's
It's
worth
like,
fighting for.
yeah. They be like, she said, come on, pull up. No, let me backtrack. But your family is worth fighting for. And even if that means like fighting in your prayer closet, sometimes even, speaking up when you know that different people are being wronged. And so, we gotta be willing to, make that investment. Just like with investments and things like that. You don't always see results immediately when you're investing in stocks, you're investing in real estate, even when they're doing like the auction and stuff and bidding on different things, you don't always, see the results immediately. Sometimes you gotta, you know what I mean? Like hang in there, you gotta stick in there, again, when they're doing auctions and they're bidding, somebody might outbid you, you know what I mean? And if you really want that thing really, really badly, then you're going to dig a little bit more deeper and come up with what you need to bid some more. So it's the same way when it comes to our families. Like if you really want to see your families whole, if you really want to see reconciliation happen, if you really want, forgiveness to take place and you want, people to start talking and just being honest and supporting and coming together, then we have to dig deep. We have to dig deep and we have to invest in our families. And I always, kind of just bring it back to with Jesus, like he was the greatest sacrifice. He paid that price for us. I had a few years of just saying paid in full, paid in full. And that thing, hits in so many different ways because, he paid in full when he died on the cross for us. And extended grace to us, no matter like how far we have fallen, because none of us are perfect, right? We've all fallen, we've all made mistakes where we've said things that we should not have said, done things that we should not have done, but God still extended, grace and mercy and those things to us. So, when it comes to, our families, we have to make the investment. Sometimes when we're making that investment, sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it could be a little uncomfortable. If you bidding on something and you gotta dig a little bit deeper in your pockets, it could be uncomfortable. It could be like, ouch, like I didn't want to have to like, put that
I
extra.
ain't want to go that deep into my pocket, but I really want it. So all right.
Yes, but I really want it. And so we got to keep that in mind when it comes to, our family. So I just encourage everybody to, read the book, and don't just read the book and check off like, yep, I read it, but no, like really use this as an opportunity to have conversations with your family, really use this as an opportunity to start breaking those generational cycles, and just use this as an opportunity, even if it brings you to a place where it makes you do a lot of like self-reflection and that internal work. Allow it to take
Yes.
place, because you never know what's on the other side of your obedience. You never know what's on the other side of your investment. You never know what's on the other side of your yes. And again, bringing it back to even with us, stepping out and doing the prayer call, we never know what's on the other side of being obedient to doing that. It may have looked like something simple, like, okay, yeah, we're gathering together
Yeah.
for a prayer, but I still believe God. And
Yeah.
so I just want everybody to just be encouraged,
Yes.
and to be blessed. And I pray that this book does exactly what God said that it will do. Not what I wanted to do, not what my family wanted to do, not what society wants it to do, but what God wants it to do.
Yeah. Amen. So this is the season for focused families with restored vision. Yes, yes. So I'm going to put the link to the book. It's called What's the Bid? Focused Families with Restored Vision. It is a 28-day devotional. That is definitely a book that you want to get. I'll link it in the description. Make sure that you get a copy. Um, Otherwise, that is it. Thank you, everyone, for joining this episode of Faith Chats. I know that you were blessed by it. I don't even have to say I hope that you were, because how could you not be with this conversation? How could you not be? So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all the next time. God bless.
God bless.